Friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm up here today near the nursery. The tree nursery is behind me here. You can't really see much through all this overgrowth, but I'm in a section that's a little bit more abandoned back here, and there's a reason for that. Today, I want to talk about how we grow black soldier fly larvae. We do it back here because it's kind of smelly. I want it far away from where I'm doing most of my work. But I thought it would be cool, would be fun to come and make a little video about these black soldier fly larvae. Some of the iterations we've gone through in terms of how we raise them. I've been fiddling with this for the past few years. I really like this system, but this is the first year I've run this system, so I kind of want to talk about how we got here, how it's going, some things you may want to consider if you want to grow black soldier fly larvae for your chickens. And real quick, if you don't know, black soldier fly larvae are incredible for your chickens. The nutritional value is immense, so they're really high in fat, protein, calcium, really important things for chickens that are laying eggs or chickens that are growing, young chickens, chickens that are replacing their feathers if they're molting. Very good for birds. Chickens are adapted. They need to have some amount of insects in their diet, or at least they're adapted to having that usually. I know there are plenty of times where folks grow chickens on grains only, but really I think the healthiest diet for a chicken should involve some amount of bugs. Now, what the appropriate ratio of bugs is, I don't know. I'm not here to tell you that. But what I can say is the black soldier fly larvae are native to this part of the world, to the southeast United States where I'm at. They're native to a large swath of this continent, and they're basically distributed all across the globe now. They're native here. They do not bother humans at all. The adult flies that the larvae turn into don't have a mouth part, so they don't bite, they don't eat food, they just mate and lay eggs. The larvae are what eats the food. So they're not a nuisance, they're native, nutritional, they're easy to grow, incredibly easy to grow. You can accidentally do it down here in the southeast, and they can handle food waste. They can process food waste, which otherwise a lot of our food waste is being sent to the landfill. It boggles my mind that we're not doing this more as a culture. The fact that black soldier fly larvae is kind of a fringe thing, like black soldier fly larvae production. It's not something you hear about a lot. I mean, chicken people, maybe you've heard about it a lot recently, but it's not something we really hear about. And it's crazy to me because you contrast taking food waste, that right now most of it goes to landfill, taking waste, growing bugs that are highly nutritional, and feeding them to chickens. Contrast that with creating and maintaining the corn deserts of the Midwest and all the other bread baskets of the world and producing all these grains using all these not sustainable practices that are having a direct impact on all of our quality of life. Why are we doing that? And again, I'm not suggesting that we should be feeding chickens 100% black soldier fly larvae. I think I feed our chickens grains too. I'm not fully off of grain. I'm not against grain farming. I'm not against farmers. I'm not blaming farmers for any of this, but I'm just pointing out the contrast between growing bugs on waste, corn desert. Big contrast. Why are we not growing more grubs? This is something that this should be a big thing that we're doing a lot. Anyway, on that matter, like I said, I want to show you practically what I've learned growing the grubs, how it is very, very easy to do this without any inputs. Or I should say without purchasing inputs. We're absolutely bringing stuff in off the farm, but it's things we're finding in the waste stream. I want to show you how we're doing it, but I also want to mention I am partnered with GrubTerra. If you're unwilling or unable to grow your own black soldier fly larvae there's a lot of reasons why that may be the case. If you want to buy some black soldier fly larvae for your chickens, there's many places where you can do that. We're partnered with GrubTerra. We get a small kickback on all the sales if you use our discount code. I'll put it up here on the screen and also in the comments below, or in the description below. If you use that discount code, you get 10% off, and it helps support the channel, and it helps support the composting industry. What they're doing is really important work. I don't like to promote products or consumerism, but this is something that's really good for your chickens. It's arguably pretty good for the environment, and it helps me out, so I feel like it's all right. And I'll just be straight with you. I have not tested product from any other black soldier fly larvae producers out there. I really haven't looked at who else is in the game. GrubTerra reached out to me. They offered this partnership. I'm doing it. Do your own research if you really want to dive into all the producers and comparing how they do things. But the meat of the video, so to speak, is growing the black soldier fly larvae. So what I've landed on, black soldier fly larvae like to live in their food. Actually, I can see one sticking up right now. I think if we zoom in, I don't know if this is going to pick up. Can you guys see this guy? Anyway, there's lots of different ways to grow them. There's lots of food stocks that they can eat. They like to live in their food, so you don't have to worry about bedding for them like you do with worms. They just live in their food. They can grow on any type of food waste. The only thing they cannot eat really is woody material, lignin they cannot digest, but they could eat grass clippings. They can eat all sorts of food waste, including meat, bones, dairy, cheese, all the nasty stuff, the stuff that you typically wouldn't put in your residential compost pile, the stuff that you might not want to put in your worm bin, the really nasty stuff, they can eat it. They can eat roadkill. I mean, they just tear through food. They're so versatile in that way. They can also go through manure. So it's just, they're very versatile. They can accept a wide range of foods that most other composting practices may not want to accept. Now, they go through several stages of larval growth where they increase in size, they change a little bit. I'm not sure the exact proper terminology to talk about how they go through their different life stages, but right before they want to turn into a fly, when they're at their final larval stage, they have a natural desire to crawl up out of the muck and get into a dark, safe place to turn into a fly. That is what we're taking advantage of with this system. So all this is, there's a lot of different ways to replicate this. This is just some scrap wood, some scrap bricks, a piece of, basically scrap steel. All this was picked out of a dumpster, basically. I did buy the buckets for $1 a piece from a restaurant. But you can find buckets and wood and all this stuff typically if you do some dumpster diving. And these bins, these are also free bins. You could buy all this stuff if you want to do. It doesn't have to come from the trash. But you put it together, you get the buckets up at an angle. I did not measure the angle. There's nothing specific about the angle. It's just buckets at an angle. The buckets have holes drilled in the very bottom here to allow liquid to drain. The holes are small, like 1/8 of an inch. They need to be small enough that the adult larva cannot escape. We don't want them to escape out the bottom. We want to catch all of the adult larvae. As they crawl out of the bucket, they fall into these bins. It's really that simple. So I come out here twice a day and check. I check them in the morning, I check them in the evening, and I feed them to the chickens. The birds love it. And some days we get a lot, some days we get a little. I'm not exactly sure what that is about. Here's some things that I've noticed. Also, there's one other way that we grow black soldier fly larvae that's even easier than this. I'll talk about it at the end of the video. But this area, this little bin I have set up, not protected at all from other woodland critters like raccoons, possums, bears, critters that may want to eat some of the stuff that we feed the larva and who also may want to eat the larva themselves. And so what I have found is that even if the food waste is pretty nasty, I put it in here, someone comes and digs into it in the middle of the night. So for a while I was putting these little wire cages on the top of the buckets. That was not working. Animals were just ripping them off. Additionally, they would spill these tubs over. And so what I've moved to now, first of all, I have these bricks in the tubs. What's cool about the bricks is the larvae actually like to go underneath. There's none in here because I just harvested it, but they actually like to hide underneath the bricks. So sometimes I'll come in here, it'll look like there's nothing. I pull this up and it is just crawling with larvae. So the rocks kind of help weigh it down, prevent, if a raccoon does come up here and is sniffing around, they're not going to spill the bin and lose all of the maggots out onto the ground. The other thing is I have switched basically to feeding almost only manure and the nastiest food waste to these bins. I try to put in stuff that critters would not want to come and dig through. Now, I don't know. I've only been doing this for a week or so now where I've switched to like manure only. It has been working pretty well, but this is still pretty new and untested. I don't know. There may not be a limit to what raccoons would be willing to dig into. Possums, bear. Again, I don't know who it is. Alternatively, you could set this up in a barn. You could set up some fencing around it to keep them out, right? So just something to consider if you've got critters around. The other thing is it does smell. Depending on the food stocks you put in and how fast they chew through it, there may be some smells. One thing that I'm doing that I don't like, that I strongly recommend against, we're just on landscape fabric here. Again, we're in this like the back of the nursery. So behind me is this is old nursery pad that when we moved here, all this was all here. It was left behind from previous nursery production. We've set up our nursery work over here. And again, I just want to be out of the way, really. That's why we're over here. But what I would much rather do is have deep wood chips underneath this. I think a lot of the smell that I'm smelling right now is coming from the leachate dripping out of the bottom of the buckets and just hitting this plastic. The smells are really able to escape that way. What I've heard from listening to some lectures on black soldier fly larvae, that the adults will want to lay their eggs. They're attracted by the smell. And so we actually probably have egg laying happening under the buckets as well. We're not really able to catch those maggots. They're not really able to feed off much. There's not a whole lot under there for them to grow. So it's kind of unproductive, counterproductive to have nothing under there. If you have the wood chips, it kind of catches that smell and encourages the adults to lay more of their eggs in the bin. Because again, that's how they're repopulating, right? It's adult flies laying eggs. The eggs hatch, turn into larvae, The larvae then we feed to the chickens. Now this is not a perfect system, and so no matter what I do, some of these larvae are going to escape and turn into adults and probably come back and lay eggs here. But just to be safe, I like to throw a few out into the environment as I'm walking down to feed the chickens, just as a gratitude thing and giving back, supporting the population. But again, here in the Southeast, they are incredibly, incredibly abundant, and across much of the East Coast, the Midwest, really, they're just everywhere. If you make a compost pile out here, if you throw down organic waste in the summertime, they're not active in the winter. In the summertime, you will get these larvae in your compost pile. You'll just see them. You'll see them pop up. You probably have seen them turning your compost. So I guess that's another thing we should talk about real quick before we get into this other method that I mentioned, is that I do not put any eggs. I do not put any larvae into the bins to start with. I just put the food waste in the buckets after I've drilled the holes. The flies come in, lay the eggs, and it just starts on its own. Now at the very beginning, the first few days, you may notice a lot of like house flies hanging around, and so there may be other species coming and checking out and laying some eggs, but after a week or so, the black soldier fly larvae tend to take over and kind of, they just take over the bin, really. And then you pretty much only see them in the bin once they really get a population up and revved up and going. If you live in an area where they're not as common, you may want to buy in eggs, or you may want to buy in larvae, and you may need to be doing more things to kind of promote the population of flies in your area to a healthy level in order to continue repopulating the bins with eggs. You can also leave cardboard. They like to lay eggs on little surfaces, like cardboard has all those crevices in it. So if you put a piece of cardboard, a ripped up piece of cardboard on top of one of the buckets, once there's food waste in it, that can kind of help encourage them to lay some eggs near the food waste. They don't like to lay it in the slop, but near it, if that makes sense. At least that's my understanding anyway. But the other way that I like to utilize black soldier fly larvae, it's even easier. All you need is a container. I guess really you could do this even without a container, but let me walk over here and we'll show you what I'm talking about. I know this looks like a mess. It is. What happened here was we get a lot of bread from the food bank that's waste. It's expired. It's not able to be given out to folks. And so what do we do with it? We do feed some of it directly to the chickens, but I'm experimenting with growing larvae in it. For this method, all you need to do is get a bucket, put some waste in it, like this is all bread, put some food waste, bread, manure, whatever you're gonna feed them, put it in there. Put the lid on, but don't secure it all the way. This lid looks shut. It's not. There's a crack. It's cracked, okay? This allows the flies to get in. Look, we're already covered in maggots, covered in these larvae. And so you can just let the larvae go through here, chew through the bread, do their thing, and then after a few days, a week or two, whenever you see that there's a decent amount of larvae in there, you take the whole thing, dump it into your chickens. I don't know if I've mentioned this yet. It's hot out today. A lot of you guys are probably dealing with the heat wave we're dealing with. It's been a rough one. Anyway, that's as simple as it gets. You're just putting waste in a bucket and waiting. The black soldier flies will come, they'll do their thing, dump the whole bucket out. There's probably a higher risk for pathogens this way because, again, you're not collecting the larvae at the end. You're kind of dumping the whole thing in, and so your chickens are going to be eating young larvae, adult larvae, whatever's left of the residual food waste in there. We have not found this to be an issue, but I haven't been doing it all that long, so I would urge you to proceed with caution, do your own research. But what we've found is the chickens, in terms of food waste, we don't give them anything moldy or really awful, but they tend to know what they can and can't eat. They have access to food all day long. They're not starving. They're only foraging out of will to forage. So they're not motivated, basically, to eat things that would be bad for them. This doesn't mean it's foolproof. It doesn't mean you couldn't poison them. But again, we have not found any issues in doing this. Now here, we're just using bread, not a super pathogen-loaded food waste. Anyway, I don't know. We haven't had any issues with it yet, but I'm sure some of you guys will have opinions. Feel free to leave those down in the comments below. Let me know if you think I'm crazy for doing this, if you've done something similar and it's worked out. I'm sure I'll think of some more stuff that I want to add into this video that'll come after this part, or maybe before this part in editing, who knows. But that's the basic gist on black soldier fly larvae, how we grow them. If you want to buy a black soldier fly larva bin, there are bins specifically designed for this. I'm trying to remember what they're called. They're called a something pod. All right, I had to Google it. Protopod, that's what it's called. I have not tested these, but they look really decent. I think it's something I would like to play with at some point in the future. They are a little bit expensive, a couple $100, depending on the size that you get. So again, I don't have direct experience with that, but there are things like that out there if you want to purchase it, if you don't want to do this, kind of cobbled together, rigged up situation that I've got. But if you want to just cobble something together, I encourage you can do it. It doesn't have to be exactly like we did here. It can be anything similar. Like, you could really just throw food waste into a pile outside somewhere that you don't mind the smell, come back through a couple days later, shovel it all up, throw that into your chickens, because it'll be loaded with larvae and worms and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, that's kind of the gist. Again, if you want to buy black soldier fly larvae from Grubterra, that's a great way to support us, to support the composting industry, get some treats for your chickens. I would also encourage anyone who's interested in this topic. Living Web Farms has some really good lecture videos on black soldier fly larvae. That's where I learned a lot of stuff from. There's a lot of other content creators here on YouTube that have made their bins and talked about it. So it's fun to look at all these other designs and get inspiration from what folks are doing. I'd encourage you to look into it if you're interested in this sort of thing. Also, if you're interested in just feeding chickens off of food waste and bugs and stuff in general, what Carl Hammer and the folks up at Vermont Compost are doing is really cool with their laying hens. They are a commercial composting facility, so they have a lot of food waste and bugs. That's a different scenario, again, than if you're just dealing with your own food waste. All I mean by that is the volume of food waste that you have determines the volume of bugs you grow, and that determines how many chickens you could feed off of your bugs, but that sort of, chicken math. But folks, it's hot. I gotta take Luna on the rest of her walk. She's probably tired of just sitting here listening to me yabble around. As always, appreciate you for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next one. Let me know what questions or comments you have down below, or shoot me an email if you'd rather remain out of the public eye.